last question, and then I'll have time for hopefully some of your questions. So I probably made people more confused about what the renminbi is and whether it really is a asset reflection of value, a trade relationship, or something else. And I'll posit a couple of points here that really, right now, when you look at the renminbi and try to come up with what the factors are that drive value in this currency and its relationship to the euro, the yen, the dollar, even the ruble, it's about confidence, both onshore and offshore. The capital flight that has come from China that has led to the depletion of reserves, that has led to some of the rather erratic policy choices that happened over the last year, this has all stemmed from Chinese confidence. So the chart that I actually look at very closely comes from Market News International, one of my favorite small but very feisty news organizations. The China Consumer Sentiment Index that they have was now part of Westpac. They actually have this chart which you can get monthly. And if you compare the dollar relationship to this chart, you'll actually get a really solid view about how capital flight is partially measured by consumer confidence. It's said that China is a great place to make money and a horrible place to keep it. And until China changes that phrase, until it's also a good place to keep money, the capital flight pressures are going to continue to be there. The leadership change that's upcoming in China in October of next year is going to be an incredibly important part of this sentiment and a view of whether they're going to be able to cap the property market bubble or really help solve the non-performing loan problems in the banks. And those two things are dragging the consumer sentiment lower, along with the fact that GDP is just difficult to see growing when you're trying to shift the economy from an investment and industrial base to a service sector and consumer spending base. Perversely, if you want to make people feel rich and spend money, let's go back to one slide. What was the most important relationship for the Japanese Chinese? It was that the weakness of the yen led to Chinese tourism in Japan. If the authorities are not careful, the relationship of the dollar, the euro, and the yen to the renminbi, it has to be stable enough to continue to keep consumers confident enough that inflation's being held at bay and that they can go abroad and spend money safely. So Chinese tourism is another way of measuring Chinese FDI outflow. And that outflow is increasingly an important part of how to judge the success of the authorities in taking the demand of doubt and turning it into something that makes them feel that the outflow is for a good longer-term sustainable cause. The ability for the Chinese to buy companies in the US, in Europe, and in Asia may be a political one, but it's also part and parcel of how these currencies are stabilized. So I look at the Chinese outflow and I know that it's now almost the same as the Chinese inflow of capital from places like the West. So this balance is an important part of the larger picture. No country that is a reserve currency really can have a sustainably large current account surplus without significant political backlash and problems in the world community. One of the reasons why the euro has the problems it does is that it continues to be a current account surplus country region, particularly in Germany, which is approaching 8% of current account surplus which makes things far less stable, and which is one of the reasons why the Chinese were so willing to let the renminbi move and do some of these capital opening moves in 2008 to 2012. So I've thrown a lot at you there. The capital outflow story in China is partially a confidence game. It's partially by design, but it's an ongoing way of measuring whether we are going to see the renminbi go to 7 or stay here between 670 and 682 over the next 12 months. With $3 trillion of reserves and a trade surplus, the authorities feel pretty confident that they can stop any capital outflow, along with rather draconian measures to stop that. And they've been fairly successful in slowing the pace of reserve outflow. But as you can see from the chart on the right, there's still a lot going on. There is still a lot of foreign capital flow going out of China. And some of that is by design so that their companies can become more international, just like making the name WeChat as ubiquitous as Facebook, a tall order, or making Alibaba as important as Amazon to the West.